Okay, so welcome to the unit of Environmental Science and Energy Transition. Today, so this is learning outcome 4, Dahlia. So this is all around understanding the dependence of alternative energy sources on storage and grid management. So I'm just going to I'll go over the different learning outcomes required for this unit. This thing will move out the way for me. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to Okay, so for learning outcome 4, this is all around obviously understanding the dependence of alternative energy sources on storage and grid management. So obviously in the transition the push for more renewable energy, we're going to have to look around how we use the grid. So one of the outcomes is around being able to understand and outline the key differences between a centralised and a distributed grid. 4.2, so we're going to look at how we compare the energy storage options for different types of renewable energy. So we know the science is different for each renewable energy, therefore the storage will look quite differently and presents different challenges. 4.3, so we will be able to describe the importance of energy storage and grid management systems for energy transformation. So the systems that are in place currently aren't sufficient. So how do we get there? And why is it important? And it is important. So 4.4 is around explaining the importance of life cycle assessment to be able to understand the potential environmental impact of lithium batteries. 4.5, so students will know how to understand how to analyse how circular economy can be used to manage battery waste and shortage of rare raw materials. And then we've got to the other side. So the different points around energy storage. So we'll cover today energy storage for solar and wind. We'll look at how to store hydrogen economy, the role of hydropower as a virtual battery and other technological alternatives, the role of nuclear energy in balancing the grid and ensuring energy security, and the environmental impact of lithium batteries, which is a very controversial topic if you're maybe aware already, and explain how to use life cycle analysis, so what life cycle analysis is and why is it important when we think about comparing different renewable alternatives. And explore the circular economy as a waste management strategy. So encouraging circular economy principles for the energy sector is massive at the moment. So we'll cover that, and we'll talk around what does it look like to have a centralised versus a distributed grid, and what challenges that will present. So does that make sense, Dahlia? Is that okay?
Yeah, it's clear for me. Thank you. I'm with you.
Thank you. And just worth noting, the principles of circular economy and circular business models are going to be covered in detail by Unit 3, Sustainability as a Business Strategy. So there we go. So I'll head on to the slides. Okay. So the indicative content for today. So we're going to cover the storage of energy. So what does it look like? How do we go about storing energy, especially when it can be intermittent for renewable energy? We don't have a constant supply, it may be changeable. So there have been challenges around how we store energy like that. Hydrogen economy, so the role of hydropower as a virtual battery and other technological alternatives. The role of nuclear energy in balancing the grid and ensuring energy security. Obviously, there are different ways of thinking about the use of nuclear energy, but we know that it has a potential role to play in the future for energy security. So we'll look at the environmental impact of lithium batteries, which is a controversial topic, and we'll explain how we can use life cycle analysis as a methodology to predict potential controversial impacts when we look to use the lithium batteries. So, and we'll explore the circular economy as a waste management strategy. We will look at the centralised versus a distributed grid. So there is a push to move away from to decentralise the energy grid, and even though the technology isn't, we've got a lot of work to do there, there is potential to use both. So yeah, we'll go into that in more detail. Okay, so learning outcome 4. So we're going to today really start to understand the dependence of alternative energy sources on storage and grid management. So alternative energy sources, so we've got wind, solar, tidal wave, and sometimes sorry, I'm just going to check something. That's fine, sorry about that. Yeah, so we've got the different types of alternative energy sources. So wind, solar, tidal, wave, and sometimes geothermal depend heavily on energy storage and grid management because they don't behave like traditional fossil fuel power stations. So whereas fossil fuel is a constant flow, renewable energy relies on climate and the weather systems. So it's intermittent. It's not a constant, endless supply. So when we think about looking to fully moving towards renewable energy, we need to really understand the technology around energy storage and grid management for it to be sustainable. So yeah, just to have that in your mind. Have you encountered being in your work area, Dahlia? Have you encountered this problem before, or come across this scenario?
According to the alternative energy sources, I think no.
Yeah. Okay.
Until now.
Okay.
I have so to work in this area, but until now I didn't. I suppose I didn't work with environment.
Okay, that's great.
Yes.
If you want to raise any points or any experiences that you may have, it doesn't have to be about renewable energy. It could be anything.
Yes.
Please interject. Please just yeah.
Yeah, I'm so new to this era, so I just I just want to take all the info because I think
yeah,
little bit I have little bit knowledge about sources of energy for the work, but I know like information, general info.
yeah, I understand.
I think
Okay, no, that's perfect. You've got a good start anyway. So
thank you.
so when it comes to renewable energy, obviously, as I mentioned, their availability does depend on the weather, the daylight, and natural cycles, which is why it is it's a sustainable way of generating energy, which is great. But the only drawback of that is that it can be unpredictable. So there can be a mismatch between when energy is generated and when consumers need it. So it's all about how do we close that gap? How do we bridge the gap? So that's when the role of battery storage and smart grid systems is there, and we will need technology to close that gap. Let's use the positives of technology here because there are a lot of them. But obviously, technology cannot control the weather and the weather system, so we just have to have that awareness as well. So 3 good ways to think about this in terms of what are the main factors that really we need to think about is variability, flexibility, and system stability. So we can break it down into those three areas. So in terms of variability, the core challenges that renewables present us with. So wind and solar generate power when the resource is available, not necessarily when the grid needs it. We can't just push a button and expect it to just be there all the time. So solar peaks, when we think about solar energy, it peaks at midday, drops in the evening and disappears at night. Wind, that varies hour by hour. I'm in Manchester, it's very windy most of the time, so we can do it up north. And I love to do when
I have been to there. I have been once to
even
Manchester.
one. Did you find it very windy like me?
I think yes. I
Yeah.
think it's windy.
Very, and often, like my children will go on, if we go in the car sometimes, when we're on the motorway, well, there's a lot of wind turbines, and me and my children love them. I find them fascinating things,
Yeah.
but they do well up here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tidal is a bit more predictable, but it's not aligned with demand cycles. Wave power depends on storms and ocean conditions. So this variability with and unpredictability of weather systems means that renewable penetration grows. As it grows, the grid cannot rely on them alone for steady output. So we know that we're going to, as an energy mix, renewable energy will have a massive role to play, but that alone is not going to be. It's not kind of. We need to be really agile and flexible when we look to the future, and the energy system that we use. So the system needs ways to store excess power and release it later, or ramp up other sources when renewable energy stops. So it's a bit of a trade-off. Do we look at ways to store excess power from renewable energy and use it when energy when it's not there, when it drops, or do we look to non-renewables when there's that gap? So yeah, it's a bit of a trade-off there. Okay, so just going to zoom in here. So in terms of energy storage, how do we turn intermittent power into usable supply? So if intermittent power is where the power supply is changeable, isn't reliable. So we need to find a way of taking the energy when it is at a peak and redirecting it to be able to store it. So this is when batteries come into play. So these are really useful for short-term storage, and they will help us to balance sudden drops in renewable output. So they can be positive, and they can help us manage short-term demand spikes. So when we do have spikes in renewable energy, where we need a place to store that. So at the moment there's a kind of on the market, the lithium ion dominates the market. But there are different types of batteries as well. But at the moment, lithium is the ion is the dominant form of battery. So then we move on to pumped hydro storage. So the most widely deployed long duration storage. So when there's excess renewable electricity, water is pumped uphill during shortages, and it is released to generate electricity. It's stable and proven, and provides long-term energy, but at scale. So there are across the UK, we do look. We do store a lot of energy through hydro store, through dams, and we do have a lot of rain in this country. So it has become a dominant form. We can tap into that when we find that renewable energy supply does dip. So moved on to hydrogen. So excess renewable electricity can split water into hydrogen, which can be stored for weeks or months after, and then can be burned in turbines used in industry, different sectors, and turned back into electricity using fuel cells. So this supports seasonal storage, something that batteries cannot do economically. So again, that you see here the influence of the market on this. So that's another consideration as well when we look towards the type of batteries and storage that we do use. What does the market look like? Are the supply chains scaled up? Are they ready to deal with that type of battery? And then thermal storage. So heat can be stored in molten rocks, hot water tanks, or phase change materials. And then we have other emerging storage. So we have compressed air storage, gravity storage, liquid air storage, and they provide multi-hour or multi-day coverage. So without storage, high penetration of renewables would cause frequent power shortages and grid instability. So as I mentioned in the last session, for the UK, I think we're at around the energy mix is around 50%. We use 50% of renewable energy, but we know that we can't use that solely. So this is why we need we need to really look at how we can continue to store excess energy for the future to be able to stop reliance on fossil fuels and therefore reduce our greenhouse gases, which contribute to climate change. So I'm going to just show you a short video. So I'm just going to find it. Sorry, won't be a sec. There's a really odd. I'm just going to show you this short video that I think is quite handy. Might be helpful.
Trying to write with nonstop pings? That's where Grammarly comes in.
Sorry about that.
The electrical grid. The electric grid is the network through which power is generated, transmitted, and distributed to consumers. The electric grid is broadly made up of three main components: generation, transmission or distribution, and consumption. There are several key pieces of infrastructure that are built to support the delivery of electricity to consumers. It is comprised of these components: generating plants, where electricity is produced; transmission lines, infrastructure that allows electricity to be transported over long distances; substations, where electricity voltage is increased or decreased; transformers, the mechanisms that actually increase or decrease the electricity voltage; distribution lines, infrastructure similar to transmission lines but for lower voltages of electricity. The grid was created to solve the problem of geographic separation between electricity production and consumption. Electricity is often produced far from where it is used, so infrastructure needs to be built to connect the two. Prior to the invention of the modern grid, electricity producers each developed their own distribution systems for delivering electricity to customers. This system was costly and often led to underused infrastructure and wasted electricity. The modern grid was invented to allow various producers to share infrastructure for production and distribution, which led to increased reliability and lower costs. So how exactly does the grid work? After electricity is generated, the voltage is stepped up at a substation. This voltage increase allows electricity to travel long distances while minimizing the amount of electricity lost. The electricity then travels along transmission lines, either overhead or underground. Once it reaches its destination, another substation steps the voltage down to a level suitable for distribution lines that deliver electricity to consumers. The electrical grid provides electricity to various consumers with varying needs. For instance, industrial consumers are large facilities like manufacturing plants. Commercial consumers are office buildings or high-rise towers, and residential consumers are individual homes. The electrical grid is one of the most important inventions in our modern world. The centralized nature of the grid has made it an ideal structure for large-scale electricity production. However, some of the grid's infrastructure is outdated and is not capable of accommodating small-scale electricity generation technologies. The smart grid is this generation's answer to the electrical grid's shortcomings. The smart grid is simply the electrical grid enhanced by information technology. This turns the electrical grid into an intelligent network that allows for real-time information about electricity production and consumption and more efficient incorporation of small-scale electricity generation sources. As the electricity power supply mix changes, the demands on the grid for reliability, efficiency, and cost-effectiveness will continue to be a complex challenge. So that's the electrical grid.
Cool. So I hope, oh gosh, I hope that was helpful. I'm just going to go back onto the slides. Is there anything, I think it's really good as well, I find, to visualise how the grid works, and then when you see it visually, you understand all the different interdependencies and how everything is so connected.
I think it's my first time to see it like in detail, so I think I have to restudy it.
Yeah.
Too much information for me, I think, for the grid management.
Yeah. Was that too much information, did you say? Sorry.
Yes,
Yeah.
for me, I think it's I have to like rewatch the video again to understand it bit by bit.
Yeah, okay. I will find a simpler version for you, Dahlia, and post it on the WhatsApp chat after here.
Oh no, thank you. Not bothering yourself, but I will
Yeah.
reread again this part, and I think if I rewatch it again, I think I will get the idea.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, whatever you need.
So I'm sorry if my baby did anything.
Don't be sorry. No, it's fine. Don't worry. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
She can learn as well. If you need a minute, do you need a minute, or are you okay?
Excuse me just a second.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I'm with you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Everything is okay. I'm with you.
Sorry, Dahlia, did you want me to start, or do you want me to wait a minute? I'll give you a minute.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. No, I'm with you. Thank you.
Oh, right. Okay.
I was waiting for you.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on, a bit more about the grid management. So obviously the video showed the infrastructure. So how the infrastructure in place is important in passing and distributing renewable energy and different types of energy. The problem that we have is that a lot of the infrastructure has become outdated and doesn't match the problems that we have. So the modern grid must be smarter and needs to be more flexible than the fossil fuel era grid. So the infrastructure we had in place kind of met the demand, the technology for fossil fuels, but now we've seen obviously different types of energy being introduced. It doesn't match this technology. So we've got a few different challenges. So balancing supply and demand in real time, as we mentioned before. Grid operators must constantly balance both sides. And this gets hard with intermittent renewables. So they rely on forecasting tools for wind and solar output, demand response, so shifting consumption to times of high renewable energy. And then we've got transmission upgrades. So this slide is specifically for renewable energy only, by the way. Transmission upgrades. So renewables are often far from where the demand is. So you'll maybe, for example, in Manchester, this isn't just an example. If we were to rely on tidal energy from the southern England, you'd have the problem of transferring the energy up north. So there is a challenge around actually distributing energy geographically. So offshore wind sits outside at sea. Solar farms live in rural deserts or remote fields. So this means that we do need to look at how we use technology. We need new transmission lines and new interconnectors to move clean energy to where it is needed. So obviously there is going to be an impact. It's not just about the energy that we use, but in building new systems, they're going to be embodied carbon. There's going to be stored carbon that needs to be used in order to build a new infrastructure. Any questions that you have, Dahlia, just let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And I think I'm just a little bit confused in this part. Not because of you, because of my baby. So I will listen to you.
Okay, no worries. If you
Okay.
want, it's okay if you. I can carry on with the recording if you like. If you need to go, don't worry.
Um, it would be good for me if it's okay with you.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Thank
fine.
you.
So you want me? That's absolutely fine, and you can catch up with the recording when it's good for you.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. It's okay. Hope you feel better and have a good day.
You too, Emma. Thank you.
Take care. Bye bye. Okay, so moving on to the frequency and voltage stability. So fossil plants have heavy spinning turbines that naturally stabilise frequency. Renewables connected through inverters do not. So grid operators need synchronous condensers. There's a lot of different things that are needed to make them effective. And then we've got distributed energy sources, so rooftop solar, batteries and electric vehicles introduce millions of small power sources. Managing these requires digital monitoring, smart meters, advanced control software. This is called the smart grid. So here this is a great example of the digitalisation of the energy system and how, for example, with electrical vehicles, there's a reliance now on a different type of technology. So it's having an awareness of kind of like the different technologies that are around at the moment. They look very differently. We'll move on now to the next slide. So why is storage and grid management important as renewables grow? So as renewable penetration increases, the system shifts from fuel-based control to weather-based control. So in switching, making a move more towards renewable energy, we are relying on weather systems. So we just, it's a great thing because it means that we don't have to rely on fossil fuels, but it's just how we manage that that's the important thing in the transition for sustainable development. So at low levels of renewables, from 10 to 20%, variability is manageable using existing grid flexibility. At medium levels, storage becomes essential. At high levels, we've got long duration storage, flexible demand, and major grid upgrades become unavoidable. Countries like Denmark, Germany, and parts of Australia already face these challenges. So it looks differently for different countries. Going back to the previous session around the geography of each country is different, and the challenges are different depending on the climate. So the bigger the picture, so the reliability, resilience, and affordability. So alternative energy sources only deliver their potential if supported by the right infrastructure. So this includes looking at storage, flexible backup plants, smart forecasting, strong grid interconnections, and digital grid management. So what turns intermittent energy into secure, reliable electricity? Renewables alone cannot provide a stable energy system, but renewables plus storage plus modern grid management can. So it's just to have an awareness of how there isn't one size fits all. We're going to have to look at different what the different barriers are to be able to be sustainable in the energy sources that we do use for the future to keep the greenhouse to make sure we reach the zero carbon targets for 2038. So the difference between a centralised and distributed grid. So there is a difference, and I'm going to show you a short video here that I found before. This is just a short video here. Sorry, it's loading very slowly today. Must be tired like us.
What is the difference between distributed and centralized generation? Have you ever wondered how electricity gets from power plants to your home? Today, we will break down the differences between distributed generation and centralized generation. Understanding these concepts can help you appreciate how energy is produced and delivered. Centralized generation refers to large power plants that produce electricity at a single location. These facilities can include coal, natural gas, nuclear, large hydroelectric plants, and big solar or wind farms. They generate substantial amounts of electricity, which is then sent over long distances through high-voltage transmission lines. This method allows for efficient, large-scale power production, benefiting from economies of scale. However, it comes with challenges. The infrastructure needed is costly, and long transmission lines can lead to energy losses. If a centralized plant fails, it can cause widespread outages. On the other hand, distributed generation consists of smaller power sources located closer to where electricity is used. Examples include rooftop solar panels, small wind turbines, and battery storage systems. These systems usually range from a few kilowatts to several megawatts. Because they are near the point of consumption, distributed generation reduces transmission losses and can enhance local grid reliability. Some of these systems can even operate independently, providing power during larger grid outages. Utilities are increasingly integrating distributed energy resources to improve energy efficiency and support renewable energy use. However, managing these smaller systems can be more complex, requiring careful coordination to maintain grid stability. In summary, centralized generation focuses on large plants that supply power over long distances, while distributed generation emphasizes smaller local sources. Each method has its strengths and weaknesses, and utilities often balance both to optimize reliability and sustainability. Understanding these differences can help you appreciate the energy landscape and the choices available for future energy production.
Okay, so I hope that helped a little bit. So as the video explored and highlighted, a centralised grid is a kind of the history of its development. It was built in the 20th century. At the time, was a very positive, innovative thing that provided electricity and changed a lot of people's lives. So it's been built around large power stations that send electricity over long distances to consumers. So that's the kind of tip. That's how it started. The centralized grid. The key characteristics of a centralized grid is that it has a large central power plant, whether it be coal, gas, nuclear, or big hydro. It has a one-way power flow, so you've got your generation, transmission, distribution, and then to the consumers. So that is the flow of energy generation. And obviously there is still energy that is used to transport that along the line, which ends up with to consumers or domestic housing. So the long transmission lines, because production is far from demand, and this has often been a problem, and will seem deemed as being quite a problem. So the grid stability comes from big spinning turbines providing inertia. Control is top down. Operators manage a predictable flow of electricity. So there have been, massive advantages of this. So it's simple to operate from a grid control perspective. Economies of scale from large plants and predictable output from central generators. Although there are many limitations, so we're vulnerable we are vulnerable just solely using a centralised grid, because it's a single point of failure. So if something goes wrong, it affects the whole chain. So it's also hard to integrate lots of small renewable sources. So it's very rigid. And we know that the kind of the move towards renewable energy, we're going to need it to be able to have systems in place that can integrate the energy supply. There's also the long distance, due to the long distance lines in that production is so far from demand, you can lose energy through the transmission. So there's that loss of energy there, which isn't sustainable. And then it is less flexible in responding to variable demand and supply. So it will keep on pumping energy. We don't always need that constant flow of energy. So it's about how we manage that. And we have, seen the energy losses over time from using central grid. So in contrast, a distributed grid, also known as decentralized grid, spreads energy across many different small or medium sources close to where electricity is used. So this is seen, as being more efficient, because you're able to go closer to get energy, closer to home. So key characteristics: many small generators. So, a rooftop solar, community wind, local batteries and micro grids, two-way power flow. So we've seen an absolute, a massive turn to people, consumers pumping energy back into the grid. So you've got two-way flow. So that's positive. It's more sustainable because consumers can both use and then also produce energy as well, which is fantastic. Local generation reduces need for long distance transmission. So you're gonna not be having that kind of energy loss there if you are using local energy supply. So flexible from storage, smart meters, EVs and real-time management. So there's potential to have more control over this system. So the advantages are we're more resilient. If one part fails, the rest often stays up in comparison to the central grid. If something goes wrong, it kind of impacts the whole chain. Reduces transmission losses, so it doesn't have to travel as far. So you're not losing energy there. Integrates renewables more easily. So it's that kind of this system, a distributed grid, is more supportive of renewable energy in a practical sense. Empowers consumers to generate, store and trade energy. So there's this thing about energy dependence. Local communities. There was an example, an amazing example of a street, and I'm going to show you the video now. They decided to raise money to start their own energy supply, and I'm going to find it for you now. I can't remember the exact name of the film. Okay, I don't think I'm going to find it on here, so I'll share it after. Sorry about that, but it just shows the kind of the power of local communities. We're seeing a lot more local communities look to kind of generate their own power. Bills are excessive. It's costly for communities. There's a massive connection with energy supply and climate justice in terms of energy kind of impacting future life outcomes. A lot of communities face problems around affording to pay bills, which then affects the house, ventilation, problems with mold, which then can affect health outcomes. So I think there has been a massive shift. I know there has been a massive shift for consumers to generate their own electricity, and having a decentralized grid is is positive for that. So there are limitations also with that, like with anything. It is complex to manage to have a decentralized grid because millions of assets must be coordinated, which brings in other problems around asset management and control. Requires advanced digital infrastructure and smart grid technology. Stability is harder to maintain without traditional rotating generators. So to summarise, a centralised grid relies on big central plants pushing electricity out in one direction. A distributed grid uses many small local sources with two-way flows and digital controls. Both systems can coexist, but as renewables grow, most countries are shifting towards a more distributed model supported by modern grid management and storage. So when we look to the next section, we're going to compare energy storage options for different renewable energy sources. So renewable energy sources do behave differently. Some are predictable, but some intermittent. Others are steady but low put, and some fluctuate rapidly. So not all renewable energy sources are the same. Because of this, the best storage option depends on the nature of the renewable resource. Below is a structured comparison, which I'm going to go into now. So here we have the different types of renewable energy. We've got solar power, wind power, hydroelectric power, and wave power. Tidal power, geothermal energy. So these lists go through the different types of characteristics. So there's the science, the problem with storage, and how what the grid management looks like for each of those renewable energies. So here, I'm not going to go through every one of those. Here is a summary table of all the different renewable types of energy. So we've got solar, wind, hydro, wave, tidal, and geothermal. So in terms of short-term storage, the comparisons are here. So you've got a mixture of battery use, built-in reservoir, minimal storage for geothermal, and then long-term storage. You've got a mixture there of hydrogen, thermal, and pumped hydrogen. And why it works. So smooth daylight night cycle for solar. Wind handles turbulence and low wind events. So if you want to have a read through those. Okay, so one really important point to understand to be able to complete this learning objective, learning outcome, is that we need to really kind of have firm in our head that it's really important for energy storage and grid management systems for the transformation for energy security. So when we do, we look to meet the ambitious climate targets. So it's zero carbon for 2050 for the UK, 2038 for Greater Manchester, just a heads up there. We need to think really wisely and be really flexible in terms of the different renewable energies that we use and how we think about how we store them. And whether that matches the current grid management systems that we have in place. So energy transformation. So the shift from fossil fuels to renewable and low carbon sources depends heavily on energy storage and advanced grid management. Without these two elements, modern energy systems cannot maintain reliability, stability, or efficiency as renewables replace traditional fuel-based generation. So whilst it's great that we're moving increasingly towards using renewable energy, if the system isn't there, isn't in place or isn't set for the future, then this is weak, this is not sustainable. So we do have to have that long-term thinking when it comes to thinking about meeting the targets, because if we're going to kind of look towards renewable energy increasingly, but we're not going to be able to store it, then we're wasting electricity and energy again, and that isn't sustainable. So yeah, this is just important to think about how we be flexible with this. And storage and grid management are what turn intermittent supply into dependable energy. So yeah, it's so important that the storage that we have in place and the grid management can deal with the changeable supply of energy from renewable energy. So storage allows renewable energy to become usable at the right time. So long as we get to grips with how we store energy, renewable energy is going to be, really sustainable. So most renewable sources don't match pattern demands. Solar peaks at midday and disappears at night. And then we have another example. So wind power may blow strongly at 3 a.m. but drop in the evening. Tidal cycles rarely line up with peak demand. And we have wave output depends on sea conditions rather than daily consumption. So we see there we're at the mercy of nature. Nature is unpredictable. So that is why it's seen as being quite limited. But there are ways in which to get around this. So energy storage fills these gaps, so it bridges the gap by shifting electricity from times of surplus to times of shortage. So we know that energy storage is the way forward. So it's positive. We just need to understand how to do it effectively. So smoothing short-term fluctuations. So batteries can absorb sudden dips or spikes in output from solar or wind, helping operators to keep the grid stable in real time. Managing daily cycles. So there's different types of batteries, lithium being one of them. And this allows battery flow to shift energy through the day, letting solar power support evening peaks. And then covering multi-day or weekly gaps by pumping hydro, compressed air and hydrogen systems provide large capacity for longer outage in renewable output. And then we have seasonal balancing. So we in the UK look towards the reservoirs to allow excess summer solar or spring hydro to support winter demand. So we do use that a lot in the UK. Without storage, renewable energy would regularly be wasted or unavailable when needed, facing grids to keep relying on fossil fuels. And we don't want that. We want to move away from that. So we need to understand how we balance the seasonal change of renewable energy. So grid management ensures the system stays reliable, stable and reliable. I'm going to show you another short video.
Welcome to Course Materials YouTube channel. In this video, we will discuss how to integrate renewable energy into power grids and the various possible challenges and solutions. The world is facing a climate crisis, and we need to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels for energy. Renewable energy sources such as solar, wind, and hydro offer a clean and sustainable way to power our lives, but they also pose some unique challenges for integrating them into existing power grids. How can we ensure a stable, reliable, and resilient grid that can handle the variability of renewables? In this article, we will explore some of the technological and non-technological solutions that can help us achieve this goal. The intermittency dilemma. One of the main challenges of integrating renewables into the grid is their intermittency. Unlike coal or gas plants that can produce a steady and predictable amount of energy, renewable energy outputs depend on weather conditions. For example, solar panels produce more energy on sunny days than on cloudy days, and wind turbines generate more power when the wind is strong than when it is calm. This means that the supply of renewable energy can fluctuate significantly, creating imbalances in the grid that can affect its stability and reliability. To address this challenge, we need to find ways to balance the supply and demand of energy, and to cope with the sudden changes in renewable energy production. Some of the possible solutions are technological solutions. Smart grids. A smart grid is a grid that can monitor, control, and optimize the flow of energy using advanced sensors, data analytics, and automation. A smart grid can anticipate the fluctuations in renewable energy production and demand, and adjust the dispatch of other energy sources accordingly. A smart grid can also integrate distributed energy resources, such as rooftop solar panels or electric vehicles, into the system and enable bidirectional communication and power flow between the grid and the consumers. Energy storage. Energy storage is a technology that can store excess renewable energy when it is abundant and release it back to the grid when it is needed. Energy storage can smooth out the supply curve of renewable energy and provide backup power during peak demand or grid emergencies. Some examples of energy storage technologies are batteries, pumped hydro, flywheels, and compressed air. Grid modernization. Grid modernization is the process of upgrading and improving the existing grid infrastructure to make it more compatible and flexible with renewable energy sources. Some of the steps involved in grid modernization are enhancing the transmission and distribution lines to reduce losses and increase capacity, investing in flexible generation sources such as natural gas plants or demand response that can ramp up or down quickly to balance the grid, and diversifying the renewable energy portfolio across different locations and technologies to reduce the risk of simultaneous outages. Non-technological solutions. Policy frameworks. Policy frameworks are the rules and regulations that govern the energy sector and influence the development and integration of renewable energy sources. Policy frameworks can support the integration of renewables by providing incentives, such as feed-in tariffs or carbon pricing, that encourage investment in renewable energy projects and discourage fossil fuel consumption. Policy frameworks can also set standards and targets for renewable energy penetration and grid integration, and facilitate the coordination and cooperation among different stakeholders, such as utilities, regulators, and consumers. Consumer engagement. Consumer engagement is the involvement and participation of energy consumers in the energy system and the grid integration process. Consumer engagement can empower consumers to make informed and responsible choices about their energy consumption and production, and to contribute to the grid stability and reliability. Some of the ways to engage consumers are providing smart meters and real-time feedback on energy usage and prices, offering demand response programs that reward consumers for reducing or shifting their energy demand during peak periods or grid stress, and enabling peer-to-peer energy trading and sharing among consumers with distributed energy resources. International collaboration. International collaboration is the exchange and sharing of knowledge and best practices among different countries and regions on renewable energy development and integration. International collaboration can accelerate the adoption and innovation of renewable energy technologies and solutions, and overcome the technical and institutional barriers that hinder the integration of renewables into the grid. Some of the platforms and initiatives that facilitate international collaboration are the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, the International Energy Agency, IA, and the Clean Energy Ministerial, CM. Integrating renewable energy into the grid is a complex and multifaceted challenge that requires a holistic and systemic approach. It is not only a technical problem, but also a social, economic, and political one. It demands innovation, collaboration, and commitment from all the actors involved in the energy system, from the producers to the consumers, and from the local to the global level. By addressing this challenge, we can create a cleaner, more resilient, and more secure energy future for ourselves and for generations to come. What are your thoughts on integrating renewable energy into the grid? What challenges and opportunities do you see? Share your perspective in the comments below.
Okay, I'm going to leave that there and move on. So I hope that was helpful. I'm not going to cover every bit there. Okay, so this section around the storage and grid management, reducing the need for fossil fuel backup. So I think this is really important because this is, a challenge for us having energy security and achieving the ambitious targets, becoming up carbon zero. So I think, a fossil fuel system relies on burning fuel whenever extra power is needed. A renewable heavy system must instead rely on stored energy, flexible demand, automated grids, and interconnections of neighbouring regions. So this thing around, being connected to our to the world and other countries is important as well. Environmental impacts can be passed on to different countries, but produced at a different part of the world. So it's just having that understanding of how we are interconnected and the how that impacts energy security for countries. So this reduces dependency on gas peaker plants and cuts emissions. So when storage and smart grid systems are well developed, renewable energy can replace fossil fuels without sacrificing reliability. So the next section is around enabling deeper decarbonisation across the whole energy system. So when we say decarbonisation, we mean to look away from using carbon in the process of generating energy. So the way to do that is obviously to use renewable energy. So energy storage and smart grids don't just support electricity; they help transform. So transforming the transport system. So I know for Greater Manchester, we in terms of public transport, there's been a massive move for the bus system to run off renewable power, and the tram relies on, the tram system is around 100% runs off renewable energy. I think maybe 50% of that comes from wind power, but I'm going to double check. Which is really positive. As I say, Greater Manchester, we are aiming to be carbon free by net zero by 2038 in comparison to the UK, which is 2050. So we've seen Greater Manchester and Manchester Council look to drive the use of heat pumps and thermal storage, especially for domestic consumers. So within industry, there's been a push towards using hydrogen made from surplus renewables, and they help us integrate all these sectors into a flexible, resilient energy network. So we know that we will need to look to diversifying the renewable energy supply for it to be sustainable long term. So the reason why storage and grid management is so important, because it will enable us to use renewable energy, and without these systems, a renewable heavy grid would face frequent power shortages, wasted renewable energy, because the supply exceeds demand at times. So it's how do we store that excess? We'd have a high reliance on fossil fuel backup. We don't want to, we want to shift. We want to keep shifting away from fossil fuel. Instability and blackouts. We'd have difficulty electrifying transport and heating, and there'd be limited renewable penetration. In the short, renewables alone cannot deliver energy transformation. Renewables plus storage plus advanced grid management can. So it's not just as easy to say, oh, we can use renewable energy there's a lot of different things to consider also. So overall importance, so energy storage provides when the energy is available. Grid management ensures how it flows safely and efficiently. Together, they turn intermittent renewable sources into a stable, reliable and scalable energy system capable of replacing fossil fuels. Okay, so now we're going to move on. We've run out on time a little bit, so we're going to talk around a little bit around the importance of life cycle assessment, also known as LCA, in understanding the environmental impact of lithium batteries. So obviously, it is important to understand when we do look at different energy solutions, to understand how sustainable they actually are. Are we just swapping one environmental problem for another? And this is where life cycle analysis assessment can be a useful methodology to understand the true environmental impact across the whole life cycle of a certain energy system. So the impacts, here's an example for lithium batteries. So with life cycle assessment, we can understand the true environmental cost impact of lithium batteries, because it looks at the entire journey of a battery, not just how it performs during its useful life. So lithium batteries are often described as clean because they enable electric vehicles, renewable energy storage and grid balancing. But in order for us to use renewable energy for electric vehicles, in order for the energy to be constant, they have to use battery storage. But these batteries also have environmental consequences that aren't obvious, and you'd have to really use life cycle analysis to understand a full and honest picture of the full scale of the environmental impact that you can't always see. So this is an example of an LCA, which does reveal the hidden impacts across the whole battery life cycle. This is, again, a lot of detail, so I do have a short video, which I hope is helpful. Okay, there we go.
Hi all. In this video, we are going to talk about the stages in the life cycle of a lithium-ion battery. As electric vehicles gain momentum, we will have large volumes of used lithium-ion batteries to manage. Researchers forecast that 400,000 tons of lithium-ion batteries will reach the end of life by the year 2022. Sending these batteries to landfills will create hazardous and inflammable waste. Efficient life cycle management of lithium-ion batteries ensure that the batteries are completely used and then efficiently recycled to extract material that can be reused. There are 4 stages in the life cycle of lithium-ion batteries. First life, that is the original application the battery was produced for example, an electric vehicle. Second life, that is to repurpose the used battery for another, less intensive application. End of life, and recycling, that is to recapture the valuable constituent materials of the battery. This is what the circular life cycle of the battery would look like. Starting with the first life, an electric vehicle battery is expected to last up to 5 to 10 years depending on different factors, and then these batteries need to be replaced. For the used battery pack, there exist 3 options: disposal, repurposing, and recycling. Disposing these batteries into landfills is problematic because cobalt, nickel, manganese, and other metals from the batteries can leak from the casings of buried batteries and contaminate soil and groundwater. The batteries should ideally be transferred for repurposing, that is the second stage in the life cycle. There is still considerable storage capacity, around 70 to 80% left in a battery at the end of its first life. The battery can be remanufactured to be used for an application that requires less frequent battery cycling. For example, a stationary energy storage system for energy generated from a solar power plant. An accurate estimate of remaining useful life and state of health of the used battery is required to direct the repurposed battery to a suitable second life application. In 2025, more than 50 gigawatt hours of batteries from EVs will reach the end of their first life globally. This number is expected to rise to 200 gigawatt hours per year by 2030. Now, this presents a huge energy storage potential. The lifespan of lithium-ion battery can be prolonged for up to 20 years through repurposing, thus delaying the need to dispose of the battery. End of life. At the end of battery life, it enters third stage, where expert handling is required for collection and safe logistics to a recycling facility. Fourth stage is recycling. The recycling process dismantles the battery and recaptures the valuable constituent materials. The extracted metal and mineral components like lithium, cobalt, nickel, aluminium, and copper can again be used in the manufacturing of new batteries. This is popularly known as urban mining. We should note that recycling of lithium-ion batteries is a capital-intensive process with dependencies on economies of scale and needs a robust downstream chain for application of extracted materials. As it stands, China is leading the recycling race, with Chinese government looking to ramp up recycling capacity to 1 million tons by 2030, according to Bloomberg. To know more about global trends in reuse and recycling of lithium-ion batteries, visit the link in the description box. Please leave a comment to share your feedback on this video and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.
Okay, I hope that was helpful. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of that, but if you want to have a look on, for examples of life cycle analysis, you can find on Moodle and other examples. Life cycle analysis helps compare different chemistries and technologies. So by having life cycle analysis as a methodology to compare different batteries, to look at the environmental impact and the science, that will help us to look to choose a battery for storage that has lower impacts on the environment and on people. Also, it's important that we look at kind of like how fit for recyclability certain batteries are. Some might not be able to be recycled. So it is, it's just having the mindset to be kind of flexible and to look at the methodology to compare different environmental impacts. So policy decisions often rely on the life cycle assessment findings. So that's why it is important in the creation of any kind of organisational policy to look at the science, to look at the data around each different energy scenario. Okay, so the life cycle analysis prevents burden shifting. So without life cycle analysis, it's easy to reduce one environmental impact while increasing another. So, for example, reducing tailpipe emissions through EVs increases demand for mining. So basically, it's a trade-off and a kind of a swap of one environmental problem to another. By using LCA as a methodology, we can really kind of quantify how much energy is used when we look at those different energy scenarios. So increasing energy storage for renewables increases pressure on water and land. Moving manufacturing to low-cost countries might raise carbon emissions if their grids are coal heavy. Life cycle analysis highlights these trade-offs, preventing policymakers and companies from unintentionally creating new environmental problems. So it is a useful tool, a very useful tool to be meaningful when you are looking at kind of energy management. So LCA guides better policy, regulation and procurement decisions. So governments and industry now use LCA results to set carbon footprint limits for batteries. And then we have the EU's battery regulation, just something to be aware of there. 2023 was brought in. It's based largely around the LCA principles requiring battery passporting and full disclosure of carbon footprint. And then we have LCA supports innovation and more sustainable battery design. So manufacturers use LCA to reduce energy use in factories, to switch to renewable powered production, and and there's some other ones in there as well. We won't go into every single one of those, but it's just an awareness of how it has become a really popular way, and reliable way, by different sectors, by manufacturing, by governments, to really, when they're making decisions about energy usage, and any kind of policy around energy usage, they can back up the kind of how valid that energy choice might be by using LCA. So why is LCA critical for understanding the impact of lithium batteries? So to summarise, it exposes a real environmental cost of mining and production. It offers a full picture of climate, land, water and pollution impacts. It helps compare lithium batteries with fossil alternatives. It supports responsible sourcing and recycling, and it prevents misleading greenwashing claims. So it drives technological improvements and policy changes. So without LCA, we would only see the benefits of lithium batteries during their first user phase. Their use phase. So and would ignore the significant upstream and downstream impacts. So from cradle to grave. So that's why if we use life cycle analysis, we can understand the energy that's used from the production to the use, and then to when they end up at landfill. So yeah, we have to be really honest and open around that. So with LCA, we can get an honest, scientifically grounded view of their role in a decarbonised energy system. So how a circular economy, this is 4.5, how can we use circular economy principles to manage battery waste and raw materials shortages? So by using a circular economy approach, we can really kind of tackle problems to keep materials in circulation, so they go round and round. They don't kind of end up at landfill. We can reuse, and given that a lot of the batteries are hard to extract, so lithium does rely on rare and critical raw materials such as lithium, cobalt, nickel and graphite. So we know that there's an impact in different countries of this extraction, so it's just having an awareness of that. At the same time, the growth of electric vehicles, grid storage and consumer electronics means waste batteries are rapidly increasing. So we know that the market has grown massively in terms of electric vehicles, but we just have to have an awareness of how that is stored and what happens to the lithium batteries once their use is no more. So the whole principle of circular economy is that it keeps materials in use, reducing the pressure on mining. So the key idea of a circular economy is simple: design products so materials can be recovered, reused, repurposed instead of thrown away. So you're preventing products being disposed of further down the life cycle. So for batteries, this has massive benefits. So better battery chemistry, smart battery management systems and repairable battery packs reduce the number of new batteries needed, so we can keep reusing them. And then that reduces the need of mining, and the environmental cost of mining over a longer lifespan. So reuse and repurposing. So before a battery becomes waste, it can be given a second life. EV batteries, for example, retain 70 to 80% of their capacity after being removed from vehicles. So just having an awareness of this, of how we can reuse and repurpose. Recycling and recovering critical minerals. If it does end up at the very last stage of the life cycle and that we are going to have to send this to landfill, then we can look at a waste management kind of approach of recycling. So recycling can recover certain different types of materials, and this is one way to keep the products in use, rather than just go to landfill and have detrimental environmental impacts. So every tonne of recycled battery material replaces a tonne that would otherwise also need to be mined, so this directly tackles resource scarcity. A circular model reduces environmental damage from mining. We've been over that. In terms of biodiversity, we know that mining has other environmental impacts, so stuff like water scarcity, toxic waste, deforestation, land erosion, and human rights as well. Like, you know, it's not just about the environment, it's about humans. Humans are exploited. We know that people, you know, the way that humans are exploited within this process is not okay and is not sustainable. We want to protect humans as well as the environment. So circular systems reduce dependence on these supply chains. Recycling on EV battery can save more than half the environmental impact of extracting raw materials. So reducing new mining reduces pressure on fragile ecosystems and vulnerable communities. So a circular economy cuts battery waste and prevents toxic pollution. And there's some of the different things to think around. So some other impacts of batteries if they are dumped in landfill. You've got soil contamination, groundwater pollution, fires in waste facilities and toxic chemical leaks. So if we do use circular economy principles, we can avoid those impacts. So we can collect, process and reintegrate safely into the supply chain. So key tools include mandatory collection schemes, producer take-back programs, or standardised battery design for easy removal and recycling. So the way in which we design products, some products are not designed to be recycled. So it's just understanding that, you know, some products, such as phones, are built for obsolescence. They're built not to last, which is, you know, a massive problem at the moment. You know, they could last longer, but they're built to kind of have an end life. So in terms, if we use that way of thinking, apply that same logic when we think about battery design, if we go for batteries that have the good design and thinking for the future to last a long time, we can then reuse and recycle. Okay, so I'll move on. So circularity reduces geopolitical risk and increases energy security. At the moment, we are so dependent on supply chains across the world when it comes to battery materials, especially from politically sensitive regions. We rely on supply chains from all over the world, such as for lithium, Chile, Argentina, and Australia. So there is an environmental impact of sourcing the lithium batteries, the transportation of those lithium batteries from different countries. So a circular economy reduces dependence on these regions by building material supply chains domestically through recycling. Countries with strong recycling systems are less vulnerable to export restrictions, political instability, market manipulation, supply chain bottlenecks. This strengthens national energy security and stabilises battery markets. So circular economy drives innovation and lowers costs. So as recycled materials become available, manufacturing costs fall, new business models develop around battery servicing and reuse. Design evolves towards more recyclable batteries. Okay, so this is just around how circular economy directly addresses both battery waste and raw material shortages. So managing battery waste, batteries are retrieved, dismantled and recycled. Hazardous waste is reduced or eliminated, and second life applications extend useful life. So this keeps materials in a constant flow like that, if you like. And then managing raw material shortages. So if we do apply circular principles, this reduces our reliance on, if there are shortages, if we're dependent on supply chains from across the world, if there's going to be any kind of war or any kind of problems around the technology in those countries, we're going to be stuck. So this is why it's really important that we are encourage circularity principles to become more self-sufficient. Recycling improves supply stability. Repurposing reduces demand on new cells. So together these actions create a more resilient, sustainable and low waste battery ecosystem. So to conclude, a circular economy is essential for managing the battery environmental impacts created by lithium-ion batteries. So by keeping materials in circulation through repair, so we call it the 4 R's, reduces through repair, reuse, repurposing and recycling, reduces waste, eases the burden on fragile supply chains, and minimises the environmental harm associated with mining. It also strengthens energy security and drives innovation towards cleaner, longer-lived and easy-to-recycle battery technologies. This approach is increasingly seen as a core component of the global clean energy transition. Sorry about that. That was a mouthful. So here we have the references from today. And we have the plenary. So any further reading you can find on Moodle for this unit. We have further reading. There's some further reading within these references on here as well, which may be helpful. So any queries or questions, please kindly email learnerwork@ukversity.co.uk. And the submission, just to remind, is due 2 weeks after the completion of the units and its delivery. Okay, there we go. Have a good day. Thank you. Bye.